My son. Lucas's quiet cries echoed through the house, fragile and insistent, as only a mother can understand. I lifted my head from the kitchen, dipping my hands into the soapy water, and my eyes immediately found him sitting on the playmat with his grandmother. His little fists were clenched, and his lips were trembling, longing for comfort. A shiver ran through me at the sight of his distress, a primal urge to hold him close and make things better. I headed toward him, my heart already tugging me closer, but then my mother-in-law's voice came into the room. "Stay away, dear," Gloria said, waving her hand dismissively. "You're spoiling him. He needs to learn to manage on his own." I froze, hovering in midair, torn between instinct and obedience. The room seemed to shrink, pressed down by the weight of my uncertainty. A slippery hand dropped to my side, and I swallowed the words rising in my throat. The air was thick, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I tried to decide what to do. But he's just a baby, I wanted to say. "He's my baby." But Gloria's eyes were fixed on Lucas, her lips folded into the familiar, unyielding line I'd grown accustomed to. Her stance was commanding, and it was clear she expected me to obey, as she always had. Ever since Lucas was born, Gloria had been there for me, giving advice that felt more like orders. And I, desperate to avoid conflict, had always stepped back, letting her take the lead and trying to keep the peace. I convinced myself that she was only trying to help, that her experience as a mother gave her insight that I might not have. But deep down, every time I pulled back, I felt a piece of myself being destroyed, my confidence in myself as a mother slipping away. "You're making him too attached," she'd say. "He should be comfortable with others, not just you." As if my love could somehow harm him, as if too much love could make him weak. I heard those words so often that they began to echo in my own mind, and I began to doubt my instincts, to question whether I was doing the right thing for my son. Lucas's cries turned to quiet sobs, his little body shaking as he looked around, searching for me. Everything inside me clenched. I wanted to take him in my arms, to hold him, to let him know I was there for him, that he was safe. The longing in his eyes was too much, and it felt like a physical ache in my chest. He needed me, and all my insides were screaming for me to go to him. "He'll be fine," Gloria said, her voice steady and unwavering. "He needs to learn to calm down." I bit my lip and nodded, even though everything in me was screaming against it. My hands returned to the dishes, but my eyes never took my eyes off Lucas. His sobs were slowly subsiding, but his tear-filled eyes were still searching, and his tiny hands were still reaching out. I felt powerless, torn between the desire to keep the peace and the overwhelming need to comfort my child. It was then that I realized I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't let Gloria's voice drown out my instincts, my love for my child. I couldn't let Lucas believe that his cries, his needs didn't matter. That when he called for me, I wouldn't be there for him. The realization hit me like a wave, and I realized I had to make a change for Lucas's sake and for my own. "Gloria," I said, my voice soft but determined. I turned off the faucet and quickly wiped my hands. She raised her eyebrows, clearly surprised. "I'm going to him." There was a pause, a tense silence that seemed to stretch on indefinitely. Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the words forming on her lips, ready for an argument. But before she could speak, I moved toward Lucas, and my heart raced as I enclosed him in my arms. It was like being released from invisible chains when the weight of my hesitation finally lifted. His small body nestled against mine, and his head rested on my shoulder. He sighed, as if all the fear and tension had left him at once. His little hands clutched at my shirt, and I kissed his temple, whispering words of comfort. I felt his body relax, the warmth of his trust engulfing me, and I realized I'd done the right thing. Gloria opened her mouth, but I shook my head, my voice harder. "I'm his mother," I said. "If he needs me, I'll be there for him." Those words gave me strength, as if I'd regained a part of myself I'd lost. She blinked, her eyes widening. For a moment, I thought she might object, but then her gaze softened, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "I just think," she began, and her voice lost its sharpness. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the struggle between the desire for control and the realization that I might be right. "I know," I interrupted softly. "I know you're trying to help, but I have to do it my way. He needs to know that I'll always be there for him." I held her gaze, wanting her to understand, to see that my love for Lucas was beyond measure or control. It was boundless, and it was what he needed most. She was silent, her gaze darting between Lucas and me. Finally, she nodded, her lips curving into a faint smile. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, honey." It wasn't an apology, but it was something a small step, a crack in the wall between us. For the first time, I felt hope that maybe we could find common ground. Lucas's breathing slowed, his tears dried, and he relaxed into my arms. I rocked gently, feeling my own tension leave. I looked at Gloria. Her gaze had gone soft, unreadable, and smiled weakly. There was a vulnerability in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before, a hint that perhaps she understood more than she was saying. "I'm going to need your help," I said, my voice softer. "But I need you to trust me too." Those words hung in the air, becoming a bridge between us that I hoped she would cross. I wanted her to be a part of Lucas's life, but I needed her to respect my role as his mother. Gloria blinked, and for a second, I thought tears appeared in her eyes. She nodded, her smile even warmer. "Of course," she said. "Of course, sweetheart." There was a softness in her voice that I hadn't heard in a long time, and it gave me hope that things could change. Things weren't perfect, and I knew we still had a long way to go. The disagreements, the moments of frustration were still ahead of us. But as I held Lucas close to me, feeling his heartbeat, I knew I had taken the first step to being the mother he needed. I had stood up for him and for myself, and it was a victory I wouldn't forget. And for the moment, that was enough. I had enough strength to keep going, to keep fighting for my son and for our common bond. Enough to believe that one day Gloria and I could find a way to work together instead of against each other. Enough to know that my love for Lucas was the one thing I could count on always, no matter what. And maybe that was enough for both of us.